Welcome back to Squawk Box. Specialty speaker maker Sonos about to make its public debut. We're going to have the CEO on just a little bit at 8 o'clock, but Leslie Picker has more on the Sonos pricing. Good morning.
Hey, Andrew. Slightly less demand than they were expecting with this deal. Sonos pricing its initial public offering $2 below the range it had been marketing to investors. That puts the wireless speaker company's offering size at slightly more than $200 million. At $15 per share, Sonos's debut valuation is about $1.5 billion, about half the value the Wall Street Journal said in late April it was targeting. Early investors like KKR sold in the deal, which can signal to public investors that a company has reached its peak. And while revenue continues to climb, the company hasn't posted a full year's worth of profitability since about 2014. But on the minds of many investors going into today's debut, competition. On the low end, it faces competition from Google and Amazon. On the high end, it faces Bose. Sonos is breaking more into streaming, but that space is also crowded with the likes of Spotify, Pandora, Apple, just to name a few. And in the face of such competition, sales and marketing expenses have been higher for Sonos than comparable consumer hardware companies. But when it comes to technology IPOs, investors just want to see future growth. They want to see a pathway to future growth. And it's been a positive environment so far for technology IPOs, with more raised year to date than any comparable period since 2012. One bad deal, though, guys, can spoil prospects for those in the pipeline.
Leslie, I'm interested here on how to think about this company, because clearly, as you said, it's got competition low versus high, but it also hasn't got quite the identity, because it's got hardware competitors like Bose, and probably consumers would think of a company like Bose ahead of it quality-wise, and then technology companies which are ahead of it in the AI spectrum like Google and Amazon. It's kind of not got quite its identity. Exactly,
which can make it very hard to value an IPO when it has kind of that identity crisis as you described there, because people don't know exactly what to compare it to. Do they compare it to a GoPro, for example, or do they compare it to more of an internet, a high-growth internet company? And that's the question that investors have to grapple with, and that's why you start to see situations like this where they're pricing $2 below a range that was already coming out at slightly lower than the expectations that they had in the private markets.
In terms of the growth, there's going to be the hardware growth, but then there's going to is there a true services component that you think gets layered on here?
I think that's the big question, and that's the question that investors have to grapple with, because when it comes to these technology IPOs, a lot of investors talk about the Act 2. You want to debut at a time where there is an Act 2. And is that streaming, is that services component going to be the Act 2 for Sonos?
This is like the Apple story. I mean, it's not the Apple story, but it is the Apple story, because Apple's a hardware company, but is now finally turned itself into a services company in many ways, and hopefully it hopes to one day get re-rated as a subscription service.
Well, the margins are higher for that.
But then Spotify and Pandora making losses still. This is a 14-year-old company making losses still. And you're talking about the growth area being the services. For a long time that they were a profitable company. I was going to actually think of it more like Roku. So Roku, people think of as a hardware company. It's not really a hardware company. Roku is actually a services business. So the question is there something that can get layered on top? I don't know the answer. We will find out, because we're going to talk to the CEO. Patrick Spence is going to join us at 8 a.m. Eastern Time ahead of the big IPO to answer all of these questions. I'm looking forward to it. I hope he hasn't been watching already, because then he knows what our questions are going to be. But either way, it's going to be a good discussion.